Alright, one more try. I made this video and then I realised I'd forgotten to hold down the push to talk button, so I switched to just record all the time and made it again and realised that I was using a ghost microphone, not an actual microphone. All it recorded was static. So, one more try. Full size, so you can actually see what's going on. You can see this destroyed model of Minas Tirith in all its glory. And 2 frames a second so that I can upload this in less than a week. One of those kind of 3D foam models where they just print a satellite picture on the top view rather than making it accurate. Anyway, the crafting system. This game includes a lot of crafting professions. And the professions are Prospector, which I've got here, Forester, Farmer, Scholar, Metalsmith, Weaponsmith, Jeweller, Tailor, Cook, and Woodworker. I think that's all of them. But you don't get to choose just your professions, you choose a vocation. This was deliberately done to force you to interact with other players. That Forester, which I don't have here, anyone can kill wolves and boars and bears, oh my, also large cats, deer, a few other animals, and you will get light hides in the Shire, you will get medium hides in Breeland, sturdy hides in the North Downs or the Lonelands, then I think it's magnificent, pristine, extraordinary, exceptional, and it goes on through these tiers of hides. A forester can take those hides to a workbench and turn them into leathers. The tailor profession turns leathers into light armour. You use brushed medium leathers to make linen armour. +5 will, which is nice for anyone who uses light armour, who's probably willpower based. And also to make medium armour, which does at least say it's made of leather. +5 fate. +14 max power. One of the things you can see here is this big stack of brown and yellow anvils. The brown one is, you are proficient at this level. The golden is, you are a master at this level. It starts off empty, which you can't see there if I scroll down. West Emnet tier, I have no experience as a West Emnet tailor at all. But I do know some recipes. So if, for example, I make this West Emnet campaign circlet, which, that's a hood. Okay, the recipe is called circlet. It has 3 possible outputs, all of which are hoods. 135 will, 108 vitality, 54 fate. This stuff does get a lot better as you level up. By making it, I gain 8 XP. The West Emnet Craft XP earned 8. Towards that 840. If I make a shed load of this stuff, and of course this kind of thing as well, it's nice for archers and burglars. So's that. So's that. It's got 10 different versions of this recipe. Now there's one that does might, if you're into might-based stuff. That's for wardens. So you have, well, vitality and might is for staying alive rather than being dangerous. So you've got all those options of things to make, and unfortunately, I've got tailor, but I don't have forester, so I can't make those leathers. I need someone who has forester to make them. What I do have is Prospector and Metalsmith. Prospector is the one who goes around and gathers barrow iron ore from barrow iron ore deposits and makes barrow iron ingots. And a Metalsmith is the one who, at that same tier, can turn barrow iron ingots into iron armour. +5 might, +5 vitality, or +5 agility. Once you've reached proficiency in one tier, you can start on the next. Once I had proficiency as a West Emnet Metalsmith, I could start on an Orion. I've got 240 so far. When you have mastery, and I think the way this works is when on apprentice it's when you have mastery, on all the others it's when you have mastery of the tier before and proficiency on this tier, you get this thing. If you're carrying Pale Brimstone, you can use it to improve, really improve, from 25% to 70%, a chance of getting the better version. From 248 armour and 5 agility to 272 armour, 5 agility and 15 max power. Slightly better. It's, you can put it at 70%, so it's easy enough to make a full set of these. If you get those, you just sell them to the vendor. Another nice feature of this game, the dressing room. You want to know what it looks like? Well, what it would look like on you, specifically, is that. That's what iron armour would look like. And also I can make shields, so you want to know what an iron buckler looks like? It looks like that. And yes, that is my bow going straight through it. So the ideal vocation for a hunter who wears medium armour and uses wood weapons would be forester, because a forester turns hides into leather, and you can find logs on the ground. A forester can gather logs from those branches on the ground, and at a workbench turn them into wood. Woodworker turns boards into wooden weapons, including the bows. As I said, you need to be at a workbench. As a metalsmith, you need to be at a forge. It says up there, facility required forge, goes from red to green when I get near this forge. Unfortunately, the forester, woodworker, tailor, which would be ideal for a hunter, make your own medium armour, make your own bows, doesn't exist. You can have forester, woodworker and farmer, or you can have forester, explorer and tailor. So you can be self-sufficient for the bow or the medium armour, but you're going to need somebody else to make the other one for you. I've got the woodsman build on my hunter. Forester, woodworker, farmer. Who cares about farming? And I've got the tailor here on my guardian, who is also Prospector metalsmith and therefore self-sufficient on heavy armour and crafting tools and a few other things. Now the heavy armour doesn't look too bad. Light armour is kind of boring mostly. It's it's just padded stuff. It doesn't look pretty. It never did, but it's reasonable. Heavy armour, level 51. This is Moria tier stuff. Khazad bronze. You have to run around Enedwaith, Moria, Lothlorien, or Southern Mirkwood to gather gather Khazad skarn, smelt Khazad bronze, and use Khazad copper ingots, buy Khazad tin ingots from a supplier, smelt them together to make Khazad bronze ingots, and then make this stuff. It looks good, doesn't it? Looks pretty good. Let's switch across to Tailor, Supreme tier. I forget what the medium looks like. Footman's armour. So that's the Moria 51 plus. And I think most of that looks alright, but check out that hat. It's not as bad as the bunny ears. There is a helmet you get around that level that has bunny ears, and that looks worse, but I don't like that hat. Likewise, the light armour, it's not a bad set if you look at the stats on it. Especially considering light armour is worn by people who... See, it's a really nice little icon for that hat, but it doesn't look like that, it looks like... Now, light armour is only worn by people who use willpower as their main stat anyway. And it looks like that if you wear the robe, or that if you wear the armour. Maybe not so great on a hobbit, looks wonderful on an elf, especially dyed black. This is another thing you can do with the dressing room. What would it look like if I dyed it this colour? Dyed black. There you go. Still not really a hobbit outfit, but it works really well on an elf. Alright, and here's my Tinker build. Tinker is Prospector again, Jeweller and Cook. Prospector it's the same Prospector. You gather copper just the same in the Shire. Everything is tiered that way. The Shire has copper ore, light hides, rowan branches for apprentice tier. Breland has barrow iron ore and silver ore. Medium hides, ash branches for the journeyman tier. North Downs you'll get rich iron ore, gold ore, sturdy hides and yew branches, and so on. What the jeweller can make is, well, actually that looks like junk to me, and 35 vitality is nice. 18 vitality, yeah, I wouldn't bother with that, you can get better things. 35 vitality again. 37 agility, it's not terrible. The jeweller is kind of unemployed because if you do retaking Pelagia, you get jewellery from that, and it is always better than anything I can make for your level. But jeweller's in there. I've got a duplicate Prospector, and I've got a cook, and if you think swordsmen or archers spend a long time learning every technique, this is a list of recipes for the cook profession. The names of which you probably can't read because I'm on 2 frames per second, but this is the list of recipes. It's kind of huge. There are all sorts of things in here between wild essences. That's not really cooking, that's mucking around. But you get, for example, a feast of... let me jump up to a tier where I've got mastery so you can see the mastered version. West Emnet tier. Venison and bean bake, plus 82 agility for half an hour. Sausage and bean casserole, 82 might for half an hour. Vitality, will, or of course agility. Fate, or you did agility. You've got ingredients which you need to make these things, like a jar of pear preserves, that's an ingredient. If you want to make a sausage and bean casserole, you're going to need venison sausage, which is an ingredient that you cook. A lot of this other stuff is bought from a supplier. I think all of that's bought from a supplier. Yeah. But this one with the bunch of pears, those pears come from a farmer. So you better have someone who has farmer. And guess what? This guy hasn't. But that woodsman build does have farmer. Cup of baked beans. You need a bunch of beans from a farmer. And 3 drop of wildflower honey you can find or buy from the supplier. Those do you get from a supplier. Yeah, all that. Facility required, none, which is handy, but for these you do need a campfire or an oven. Fortifying food. Fortifying food works differently. It gives you resistance and wound resistance, or resistance and poison resistance, resistance and disease resistance, resistance and fear resistance. There you go. Vegetable and bean soup makes you resistant to fear. And we got cooked foods, which are remove wound or poison and remove wound or poison. One of these has more in-combat regen, one of them's more out-of-combat regen, I think, is the deal. And cups of coffee, that's for a cook as well. Out-of-combat run speed. One other thing which was down here, pet food. Actually makes your Raven companion fireproof. Makes your Bog Guardian companion fire resistant. They're all fire resistance. And shadow mitigation and armour value and reduced perceived threat. How would you... Well, that's ridiculous. Oh, plus 15% perceived threat. Sorry, it's not ridiculous, it's entirely correct. The whole point of the bear is that it looks like a huge threat and everything attacks it, not me. Because I'm squishy. I did mention the wardrobe system. This is what I'm actually wearing. And it may be historically accurate, you know, at least in keeping with game lore. And it has some really good stats on it. 140. Madam Hunter's gear is always great. You know, it's really good, but man is it ugly. So on the cosmetic outfit, I'm actually wearing a set of 51 plus heavy armour, which my character can't equip, and it's cosmetically equipped to get no stats. It has entirely inappropriate stats anyway. And I'm not... Cosmetically, I'm using a minstrel's sword of the Third Age, not a staff, because it looks better. And a sentinel's heavy shield, which I really can't use because lawmasters don't use shields. If I close that, you can see that that didn't work. I'm using a staff and a sword because they use different animations, so you can't cosmetically overlay a sword over a staff or a shield over a sword. Did I mention that rock climber's gear dyed black looks good on an elf? Tell me I'm wrong, huh? I don't remember it being mentioned in the Middle-earth role-playing handbook, probably because I never read it. Or anywhere in Tolkien's works, that elves have hypnotic wiggle as an ability, but yeah, that outfit's working for her. Right. Historian. Farmer. I have not bothered. Scholar. You get a quest when you pick up the vocation, go and do a little bit of farming just so you know how it works, and you get that much XP in it from that. Scholar and Weaponsmith. Weaponsmith is dependent on Prospector. You can get Weaponsmith as an armsman, which comes with different other skills. Might be self-sufficient in ore or something. Or as part of your Scholar build. Historian is the only way you will get Scholar, and Tinker is the only way you will get Jeweller. So you then have sort of... You need at least 4 characters to get the full set, if you want the full set. You have an option of how you achieve it, but you do need a Historian and a Tinker if you want the full set. Scholar is a little different, because as a Scholar, you can find things on the ground and research them, and you will... Yeah, you research a cracked urn or a shattered picture or forgotten text, and actually acquire these. Research a sage's lockbox that you found. You research how to pick the lock and acquire a bunch of... Well, it's expert tier, so it won't be a sage's lockbox. You find those in Moria, and from those you will get... these things. And then you use a Scholar research recipe to turn them into Etching of Moria, and you can turn Etchings of Moria into tattered crystal parchments, and you can turn Etchings of Moria and rune-carved tablets, the things you found using Scholar skill on a resource node on the floor, and the things you made from them using Scholar skill, to make a thing for metalsmiths to use, or a thing for tailors to use, or these. These are annoying, you know. Prospectors find mithril flakes, but you need to make 3 of them, use 2 of them to make 1 of them, and then use 1 of each, plus a mithril flake to make this thing. It's a single-use object for single-use recipes. Those recipes produce some really nice gear, but damn, they're annoying to make. And all kinds of other stuff. Scholars make dyes, all those different colours. There are dyes at every tier, you know, loads of colours. And we make these. There are creatures in this game that reflect damage. Any kind of damage except light. Very annoying for a hunter. You do a massive amount of damage, you take a massive amount of damage. Use light oil. Suddenly you are doing light damage and it's not getting reflected at all. Very upsetting for the cargo that thought it was nearly invulnerable. It isn't. Of course, if you're a minstrel, you just do that, because that's light damage anyway, isn't it? So scholars make all kinds of stuff. Minstrel sheet music, which is a thing that stops your inductions being interrupted. That hasn't really been an issue. Reduced induction skill power cost for all of 10 seconds. Yeah, that's not something I've ever bothered to use. Champion potion. Next champion's a little more effective for a little while, etc. On Weaponsmith, this is what this video was actually originally for, you get to make, surprise surprise, weapons. Specifically the metal kinds. Axe, dagger, greatsword, sword, great axe, halberd, mace, a few other things. And it starts off, you can dressing room, it's not very well lit, there we go, bronze axe, bronze dagger, bronze greatsword. It's kind of wide and it's got quite a blunt point, but bronze isn't as strong as steel and it might need the width and the blunt point to be, you know, mechanically sound. And a bronze sword, which is... it's a bit long for a Roman gladius, but it's not... it could be a Viking sword. It's not an unreasonable sword. Let me just keep looking. I'm sure I can find an unreasonable one. The axes kind of get big and heavy. The daggers are mostly just daggers. See, that's a sword. It's made out of iron. It's got a proper handguard on it. It's decent length. It's got a good actually, it's got a two-handed grip, which is a skinny little elf. She probably needs that. Proper point, not an issue. Oh, it is a great sword, sorry. So it was a two-handed sword. It should have had a two-handed grip. That's a normal iron sword. Smaller version of the same thing. That's fine. One thing to note here. That is 2 barrow iron ingots. Each of those. Each of these is 2 low-grade steel ingots, so you need your prospector to buy some coal from the supplier and turn barrow iron ingots into low-grade steel ingots. So these are harder work to make. Is that a little too heavy a head and too short a haft? Oh well, it's still not ridiculous. Fine steel dagger, stagger. Steel greatsword. The critical version is fine steel greatsword. And I'm sure you've seen those in a historical collection or something enough like it. It's maybe a little short for a greatsword. Fine steel sword. Okay, we're into our first. What's that about? This little detail at the bottom of the picture where it's zoomed in, halfway up the blade. Is that blade dented or twisted or what? There's something wrong halfway up the blade. Also that head. Now, swords with a wider head did exist. Leaf-shaped blades. It puts more weight in the head so you get more angular momentum, so it's better for chopping without making it that wide all the way down and ridiculously heavy. So it's easier to thrust with than a really wide bladed sword, and it chops better than a slender bladed sword. Good compromise. It works. But I'm not sure about this thing of having like 2 spikes and a part that's going to be hard to pull back out past someone's rib. Still not ridiculous though. Heavy iron axe. We're back to just using barrow iron, but it's using twice as much. And they were right about the heavy part. Thing's huge. I mean, you wouldn't want to get hit with it, but you wouldn't want to get hit with any kind of axe. Halberds. Is that a halberd? That looks more like a badly designed axe. Well, it's got a spike, but it's got the halberd blade spike as well. Looks like a razor blade stuck into a toothpick, just scaled up. Headsman's axe. Now you know that's going to be ridiculously huge because, well, I knew it was going to be ridiculously huge. I didn't expect that. You can't even see it. You're going to have to turn around the other way just to see the thing. Enormous axe, because a headsman wouldn't be using it in combat. You use it for executions. The mace is a lump on a stick. It kind of looks like a decoration from a church, but it's a lump on a stick. You can't really get a mace all that wrong. Sword is a sword. And then the highest level requirement for that tier of crafting, 4 steel ingots, 2 iron ingots, and a sapphire shard. And to get the critical, you need to use one of those journals. So you could just get 25, 42, 7 fate, 88 critical rating. With the journal, you stand a better chance of getting 27 for 45, 7 fate, 21 in combat power regen, and 92 critical rating. Woohoo! Same recipe produces another version, which is in combat power regen rather than fate, and will. Great. An axe that gives you a willpower boost. The middle bit's a little pretty, but there's nothing wrong with that. The hook at the bottom, I'm doubtful of the practical value of a hook at the bottom, but I can see how maybe if it got to a brawl, if the melee got a bit too close, you could, grab further up just behind the head with your left hand and punch with your right and stick that hook in someone's face, and then shove them across to your left to top them off balance, and then bring the axe up and back down on him. In fact, if you shoved him and swung the axe at the same time, just then bring it down. So that might be valid. And a spike on the end for sticking in people's faces isn't nothing wrong with that. I'm not sure having 2 axe heads, one bigger than the other, is a really great idea. Maybe it is. Dagger is dagger. Big sword is big sword. And it's got a wiggly bit stuck to the blade at the bottom, but it's a big sword. Halberd. Oh, I'm not sure that's a halberd. It's more of a pole axe. Well, it's got a spike and a spike on the back and an axe on the front, so it's not a terrible one. Stonking great headsman's axe. Double-sided, so you can execute twice as many people in a day if you have to stop and sharpen it. I can't help thinking the shaft was a bit too narrow for a blade that heavy in a combat scenario. Spiky lump on a stick. And we've got the same silly shape and the same notch on the blade as before, but we've also got this handguard. This handguard has spikes pointing back towards your hand. That just can't be a good idea. Just no way. And I think the front of it is looking a little delicate for, you know, heavy sword style. Expert tear. Rich iron. Yeah. Somebody requested one of these. My tailor and my woodworker are the ones who've had the most work making things for people to actually use. The weaponsmith and tailor are the ones who've had the most work making things for people to look as if they're using. And it's almost never been a proper sword. It's been stuff like this. Somebody actually wanted this. What is that bronze bit at the hand? There is no handguard. What is that bronze bit at the bottom of the blade? What's it for? What's it achieving? But someone wanted that. So I made him one, because I'm nice that way. And there we have a very simple, very reasonable sword. Gondorian. You're nowhere near Gondor at level 25. You'll see that style of dagger quite a lot. And one thing to say about this design, I think the handguard is the wrong way round. Those two pointy bits should be pointing upwards, so when a blade slides down your blade and hits the handguard, they catch it. Like that, see? Curved forwards. That's nice enough. Heavy bright steel axe. Hardened bright steel axe. It's the same as before, isn't it? It's the exact same model, it's just better stats. Still going to check. Again with the handguard being back to front. Okay, not so much a halberd as a double axe, but it's got a mean spear point on it, so that would be a very effective weapon against infantry or cavalry, and it'd give you great reach if you're in the second line in a melee. Headsman's axe is always just going to be ridiculous. Mace. That's a four-faced hammer, but that's a kind of mace. And the sword, maybe taking the handguard a little too far there. But, yeah, sword. Dwarves. What kind of things do dwarves like? Apparently they like spiky knuckle guards. There's a spiky knuckle guard, see, look. And a spike on the base, and a spike on the back, and this big axe head. I think that's kind of heavy. Dagger is dagger. Great sword. Dwarven... now. The pommel on the back of this greatsword, if I just rotate it so you can see it, is a hollow ring. Mostly the point of a pommel is to add weight back there so that the thing balances better. A hollow ring is a strange way to go about that. And that handguard, why do I have two handguards? Two handguards is a peculiar design. Dwarfcraft sword. This is the leaf-shaped blade I was talking about earlier. This is, you know, if it was that wide all the way down, you'd never be able to use it. But because it's thinner at the base, you can. It'll chop pretty damn well. You can probably thrust with it, not as well as you could with a rapier, but you can thrust with it. It doesn't have the reach. Why are dwarves using short weapons? Scalagrim covered this. My big complaint with this design is this handguard. Somebody's blade hits your sword, or you parry someone's blade, effectively the same thing. His blade slides towards you, it hits the handguard, it deflects off and it goes through your forearm, because it's not going to catch it, it's just going to deflect it. Axe. Actually, the spiky flower for a pommel. Western S. We're only on artisan tier and they're calling it Western S. We're nowhere near them. That's maybe a little fancier than it needs to be, but I don't think it's totally impractical. That could be fancy work on top of practical. But here we've got another leaf shape, short, good chopping power, limited thrusting ability, partly because you don't have the reach to chop either, do you? But again, with this just sort of pointless chunk rather than an actual handguard. Forged dwarfcraft, not real dwarfcraft. It's a forgery. Daggers really are just daggers most of the way through. Here we go. This is another one with a double handguard, but it does have an interesting thing in front of the handguard, which is a place to put your left hand to shorten the distance from your hands to the point, shortening your reach, but increasing your leverage at the point. So you can kind of use it as a spear. You can't half sword it. Some of these swords historically were blunt halfway up the blade, so you could, with a gauntlet, you could grab halfway up and really use it with a lot of leverage. Not what I think of when somebody says halberd. 3 spearheads sticking out of the top. I suspect that pole is too flimsy to use this particularly well in combat. It would make a great bow spear, because you'd stick the... Actually, it might not go in deep enough to make a great bow spear. Top head might not be long enough for that. But if you did stick that into a bow's throat, one thing he wouldn't do is come up the shaft to get at you, because these would get in his way. And you could swing it at someone. Yeah, that's... We should probably stop looking at headsman's axes. Pepper grinder, or a mace. It's a lump on a stick. Forged dwarfcraft sword, same as dwarfcraft sword. And 40, the expensive one. Western S steel ingots. It is such a muck around trying to remember how to make Western S steel and elf steel and all these other steels. Yeah, it's an axe. Yeah, it's a dagger. It's a trident. It's for catching really big fish. You've got 3 points. You've got quite a good spearhead on the end of it, and if you miss with that, you can stab me with one of the others. You could probably use either edge of it as an axe, but I'm not sure. I think there'd be a lot of stress at the elbow on one of those if you hit someone with it. And you might be able to use the back hook to pull someone off his horse, or use a front hook to push someone off it. Not sure I really like it, not sure I really don't. That's just another ridiculously oversized thing. That's a lump on a stick. Alright, it's got a pretty tree, but do you really think that's suitable for an elf? Elf steel dagger. First asymmetric blade. Curved. We've seen those as fighting knives. We know that's real. Elf steel sword. I think the elves get the great sword right, you know. Just straight up. The groove up the side is a fuller... This blade is thick, both sides of that groove. Therefore it's really strong, like an I-section girder. It doesn't need to be that thick all the way through. It loses very little strength by having a groove each side. It loses a lot of weight, making it a lot easier to move it around fast, which is, especially for an elf, is a great idea. But I can't back the elves on the base design on this one, because that handguard has got these hooks on the back for no purpose, and it's got this bizarre base on the blade, which is like, well, you couldn't really comfortably, even with a gauntlet, hold it. It's maybe a bit too short for that. It's too close to the handguard for that, because these hooks on the front are getting in your way. It's not catching an opponent's blade. It's not. It's a stress focus point. So I don't think that's a good feature. Ancient steel. It's made from ancient steel ingots, which are made from ancient iron. Maybe some particle physicist can tell me the difference between ancient iron and iron. Yeah, you find ancient iron ore, and you mine ancient iron ore from that, and you smelt it into ancient iron ingots, rather than just finding iron ore. How many irons are there on the periodic table? Ancient steel greatsword. Is it? Yeah, it's a sword. It's got a peculiar step in the blade, but it's a sword. Ancient steel sword. Definitely going to have to fault this one. There's no handguard. Again. Yeah, you would have to be very good with that, because you wouldn't be able to block with the handguard. It doesn't have one. Alright, that's just ridiculous. Is that a statue of a bird god, or a... It's a statue of someone posing and flexing their muscles, isn't it? Oh, yeah, master tier. Elven. No idea. Greatsword is greatsword. Halberds. Wow on the thin shaft and huge head. I wish the lighting was better in the dressing room. That's yeah, I think that counts as a weapon, but I think it needs a much thicker shaft. That's an even bigger version of the... Yes, thank you. I wanted you to scratch an itch and wave it out of sight. It's a dragon flexing its muscles? Crazy. Lump on a stick. Ooh, butterflies. Yeah. Oh, I think it'd work. It's borderline on being a six-headed axe. It's a flanged mace. Whichever way you swing it, it's going to hit with one or two of those blunt blades. Really focus the impact. It's a nasty piece of kit. I'm not so sure about putting holes in the heads. That's spreading the blade out without adding weight. The whole point of a mace is that it is a dense lump hitting a small area. And even without zooming out, I can actually already see that's ridiculous. The double hooks on the handguard, okay, they make sense, but what are these two notches on the blade? There are two notches near the base of the blade. Two sort of indentations on the upper and lower edges of it. Handguard, I can approve. Yeah, I can cope with that handguard. I'm just not keen on this wibbly edge on the blade. And master tier. You used to actually get as far as expert, and then you'd have to do a quest to finish proficiency at expert and unlock artisan, but they got rid of that. Why would you put the axe head that far back from the point? It's like a short axe with a really long spike. Just... Yeah, these are designs. Oh, yes. Did I promise that the weapon designs would get ridiculous? I believe I did promise that I would show you ridiculous designs. That is one of them. It's got spikes pointing back towards your wrist, which you can barely see there. There we go. The first bit of handguard are spikes pointing back towards your wrist. Then it has these two great hooks pointing forwards, but curving so far inwards that they can't catch anything. And it's got this spindly little thing sticking out, which looks like it wouldn't have any strength at all, up to the base of the blade. If you got rid of those two claws and the spindly bit and put this... Thank you. Yes, go on. Put it back. Put it back so they can see it. Thank you. This wide part that's got sort of a four-part shield symbol on it, and then the more runes. If you put that onto the handguard, yeah, cope. Pull it right back so the shoulders of that are the handguard. Because then you've got this blade sticking off, and that would be alright. But with that spindly thing inserted, and those two hooks, and that's just not right. Halberd. Piece of dry spaghetti with a dirty great steel Christmas tree on there. What? You've got hooks for pulling people off horses, you've got a hook for pushing people off horses, you've got a great big axe, you've got a great big spearhead which has a couple of notches kind of the wrong way round on it. It's sort of a feather effect or a leaf or something. I do wish this window was wider. It's mean, complicated, mean, great big axe. Lump on a stick. This is more like what you'd expect because the flanges are in the middle, so it's the middle part of the head that hits. So yeah, I can approve of that flange mace. And the sword has the same stupid hilt. I've seen fancy hilts on rapiers with explanations for every single detail of them and weird ways you can catch an enemy's blade and Jesus. That looks like it should be used by an Uruk-hai, not an elf. You know, and that's a wibbly blade, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you want a wibbly blade, you get a wibbly blade. And this is the giant version of the one with no handguard from before. That's pretty good. Big axe on this side, big hook on that side, big spearhead on a long pole. That sellsword's halberd, that's pretty much what I would call, you know, anti-cavalry weapon, halberd. That's spiky heavy end on a stick. And a sword that does have a handguard, although it also has these little legs sticking out of the handguard. Not seeing the point in having bug legs sticking out of the front of your handguard. But the spell sword set ain't ridiculous. Yeesh, too close, too close. A dagger with a narrow bit in the blade. Why does the dagger have a fat bit, then a narrow bit, then a blade? It's peculiar behaviour. And this is all Moria stuff, so... Double-headed axe. A great sword with a double leaf shape. It's got a wide bit that tapers back down, then a wide bit that tapers to the point. And I don't see the point... Well, I see the point of the sword, I don't see the point of that shape. You have taken a spaceship from Babylon 5? Battlestar Galactica. Let's say Battlestar Galactica. And put it on a stick. And sharpen the edges. Probably work. Classic flanged mace. Whichever way you swing it, one of those points is hitting with that hammer behind it. So, that works. Defender's sword. Yep, sword. Or his axe. Or maybe you're meant to rest a book on it so you can read out lessons in church. Triangular dagger, but hey. Some people are just into triangles, you know. Don't judge me for my geometry. T-shapes for a handguard. What do the bits on the back of the handguard towards your hand achieve? Nothing? Yeah, I thought so. Halberd with a very fat spearhead on it. It's kind of an inflated halberd. Which ought to make it harder to stick into things and therefore less useful. Mace. The heck? Kind of 3 flanged maces in one. No. No, a mace should be a lump on a stick. You've put too much of the lump too far down the haft. It's not going to contribute much. Your handguard is back to front. Those spikes should be pointing at the enemy, not at your wrist. Other than that, it's alright. Thane. Supreme. This is Moritir, but a Thane is a Rohirrim rank. You call this an axe with a head that fat, with a hammer that size on it? I call it an anvil. And he's got a notch in the head. What's that about? A peerless Thane's dagger, but Thanes do have peers. Oh well. And it's got a... Yeah, let him live. Great axe. Steaming axe, Batman. I'm not sure mounting the heads in a bronze wheel and mounting that on the haft is conventional. Alright. That is a blade that is wide all the way to the tip, therefore very heavy, and therefore very difficult to swing. But it's got a much more slender blade stuffed inside it. So it looks like you're about to unsheathe a proper sized sword from inside this blade coloured scabbard. At least the Thane knows how to make a halberd. That's... oh yeah. Vicious piece of metal. And a lump... oh, a lump on a stick with a box around it. That's... if anything, the box is going to distribute the impact if it hits someone. And if both the box and the ball hit someone, the box will absorb some of the impact and prevent the spiky ball from doing all the work. So that's very silly. I think possibly this is actually a novelty microphone, and she stole it from a press conference. And the Thane's sword, well, thank goodness for that. It does have that weird lancehead viper tip on it. But other than that, yeah, reasonable enough. Press on, and I know I've been looking at a lot of weapons here, but Calenard dagger. Yeah. Calenard sword. Yeah. Westfold axe. Curiosity of the names of the tiers. Apprentice, Journeyman, Expert, Artisan, Master are pretty obvious. They are Ered Lewin and Shire, Breland, North Downs, East Evandim, and I think just them. Western Evandim, Western Angmar, Western Misty Mountains, Troll Shores. Master tier is East Angmar, Forichelna Region. Supreme tier is Moria. Westfold tier is the Great River region. Then you get east to the Eastemnet, and you get the Eastemnet tier. Then you get to the Westernet, and you get the Westernet tier. Then you go into the Westfold and do Helm's Dyke and that whole series of battles. Then you move through to Honorian and get to the Honorian tier. So calling this tier Westfold was a bit of a peculiar choice. Bunch of spikes on a lump on a stick. Decorated axe. So decorating it makes it so much more effective in combat. They're the same design, they're just slightly better stats. Eastemnet axe. Eastemnet is the first bit of like Rohan proper that you run into. And it's an S-shaped handle. So your knuckles are in line with the blade. I don't see what you gain from this. You've moved the centre of gravity back behind your knuckles, so if you relax your grip, this thing will try to twist round and face upwards. I don't see how this S shape helps at all. I think that's a worse design than a straight haft. The knife, one thing you will notice about the Eastemnet weapons, it has a horse head carved into the pommel. And I have a slight cold. Eastemnet axe doesn't seem to have a horse anywhere on it. Eastemnet mace definitely has horse heads on it. It is 3 horse heads. Now, you hit someone with it, that'll work. That's a lot of weight. If that's all metal, that is weight at the end. And if you hit someone with it, it is focused onto this metal lump sticking out. You will ram a metal horse head very hard into someone and shatter his shoulder or his collarbone or both. Smash his ribs into his lungs, that kind of thing. That'll work. And it's got a spike on the end for jabbing with. Strong Eastemnet assault sword. Again with the horses. This is 2 horse heads facing inwards as a handguard, which is a bit rounded. I think maybe they should have put the horses' shoulders in the middle and have the horses' necks going out and the horses' heads a little further around with the noses pointing down, so there's a little more space for an incoming sword to get caught. But other than that, it's a sword. Don't worry about the black line up each side, it's just a black line up each side. Axe. Now to me, that axe looks like they put the haft through at the wrong angle. I'm sure it should be perpendicular across the head of the haft, not at that angle. The dagger is a dagger. I keep saying the dagger is just a dagger, and it's fine. And the mace, well, you can't fault the 6-pointy flanged mace design. That's a nice bit of work. Would work extremely well. Whichever way you swing it is going to hammer one of those points right into someone, armour or not. Let me zoom in first. Curious handguard. It's a curious one with this sort of double part, but I actually like it. You've got this bronze looking piece across, giving it plenty of width. It's got those two V shapes where a sword isn't going to slide right off the end of it. And this double loop effect is holding your hand further back behind that bronze bit, so if a sword comes down your blade at an angle, it isn't going to slice across the back of your hand. I know in sparring I have been hit on the back of the hand several times, and having that space might have helped. Having that great handguard might have helped. I was using a Japanese style, you know, little tiny ellipse handguard. It's not big enough. So I like the handguard. The bit I don't get about this sword is on the right hand side just now. Swing it forward so you can see it. Swing it too far. Look at the end of the sword. It's got a hole in it. Yes, she actually did that just right. Waving the sword around lets you see through the sword. You can actually see her costume through it. That really is a hole. It's not black metal. It's a hole in the sword. So they're not widening it to add weight because there's a hole in it, so that's reducing weight. What does it achieve? What is the hole for? There's some really weird tactic where you slide it over your opponent's blade and then twist, snap it. It'd have to be a very flimsy opponent's blade because you've got all this length of blade between your grip and that. I don't see what the hole achieves. Reduce suction when you have to pull it out? I don't get it. And then we've got the Honorian. It's another one at a funny angle. Kind of big for a dagger. Maul. And sword. They're okay. And I don't know any Doomfold melee weapon recipes yet. And the last set, Woodworker. That is a Rowan bow. It's the bow you make for someone who's only just got out of the tutorial and the starter. The intro sequence of quests. You only have to be level 7 to use it. It makes your skills a little tiny bit faster. No big deal. It's just a decent bow. And it just looks like a decent bow. It's fine. And at level 10 there's the heavy Rowan bow, which is slightly bigger. You can make crossbows and javelins as well, but they're just crossbows and javelins. Journeyman tier, you get the ash bow, which is, it's an ash bow. And the stout ash bow is a stout ash bow. Got a missing recipe, some missing recipes there. When you get up to expert tier, you get this thing. What's going on at the end of this bow? Where do you fasten the string? Because it can't be fastened to both of those claws, and whichever claw it isn't fastened to, or if it's fastened down here on this diamond bit around the shaft, everything above there is just extra weight and extra air resistance and not contributing anything. And it's got claws here. Why does it have claws on the front? What do they do? It's a funky design. Then you get a couple of tiers where it looks reasonable, and then you get the holly bow, which is spiky. It's got more spikes on the front. That can't be efficient. It's got uneven stress distribution. I'm sure there are weak points in that design. I'm not thrilled with it. And then you're back to reasonable bows again for a while. But I think beyond that, I think they are mostly reasonable bows. As a woodworker, you also get to make a lot of other stuff: champion horns, captain crests, minstrel instruments, warden carvings, runekeeper's parchments. Minstrel instruments have an interesting, curious change. The early tiers, level 20 to use it. The drum does more damage. The flute costs less power on ballads. The harp costs less power on anthems. The lute makes healing cost less power, and the theorbo makes healing more effective. And that is true on the 20, the 30, and the 2 tiers of 40 plus. You get into the Moria tier, there are no minstrel instruments. There is no 50 plus or 60 plus minstrel instrument tier. You get to these are 70 plus. And for these, for each of these instruments, you get a choice of recipe. So you can have the improved criticals, which is, you know, the default version is improved critical chance, which is pretty good. The Battle Singer one is the one I use for attacking. Increased damage, reduced power costs. Wary Watcher is increased healing, reduced power costs. So that's a fairly good healing one. Sort of. Resolve is increased healing, reduced healing power costs. That's an even better healing one, in my opinion. That's the one I use if I'm healing. Harmony heals and does extra damage and has reduced power costs. So that's kind of the harmony stance in between the dissonance stance, which is all about damage, and the resonance stance, which is all about healing. This is the balance between the two. And then conservation is just reduced power cost, and reduced power cost. If running out of power is your main problem, I think you're questing below level. And without taking the cloak off, I can't really show you the bagpipes, but bagpipes look like that. And the clarinet just hangs off the other side of the belt. I've been using the flute on my minstrel because it's tidy, it just sits there. Unlike the drum, which just doesn't look right with a black costume, or the harp, which looks damn heavy and doesn't work with a cloak. Alright, my minstrel's not wearing a cloak, but still, it looks ridiculously heavy, especially on a skinny little elf. Horn's alright. It's genuine. The S-shaped horn is a real thing. It's called a cornet, with 2 T's. Lute, basically a guitar, with a right angle bend in the neck, and I don't know why they did that. But, it is a... Looking at the tuning screws, it's an 8-string guitar. And the theorbo, yeah, you may think they're taking the mick with this design, but that is a real instrument. Well, the theorbo is a real instrument. It's a lute and a bass lute on a single body and neck. It just has an extra long neck, so you can have lute strings that stop halfway up and bass lute strings that stop at the top, and you can play both at once. In this case, this is a 20-string theorbo, which may be more than any really had. I haven't looked into it that much. But this double long neck thing with 2 sets of screws, that's a real instrument. And for all of these, you get the exact same set of options for output with the exact same buffs. So it's purely a question of which instrument you want to be using. And another thing that I can make is melee weapons, which start off as... let me just get rid of that great big theorbo. They start off as a chunky stick, a big chunky stick, a lump on a stick. Now, this is a woodworker recipe. Does that look like woodwork? That looks like metalwork to me. Keep clicking make. A spear, which is a dagger on a stick. And that works. Or just a stick, which works. For now. But at some point these are going to get silly. I'm going to go looking for the silly ones. Starting with expert tier, this is a stout U club. Well, technically it's a stout club, alright, but I'm thinking they've gone a bit over the top. Likewise, for the next one up in expert tier, I didn't know Troll was a playable race. That's definitely a troll club. And this one is a carpet beater. Or some kind of candle holder. I mean, these are Lawmaster weapons. They're for people like Gandalf the Grey, Radagast the Brown, to be holding in their hands and sort of point into the air to summon lightning. You're not really meant to batter orcs around the head with them, but that is not a suitable design for battering an orc around the head. That is a fancy piece of work for wafting incense around a cathedral or something. And the next one up is one of those things you see on a hospital or a healer's tent. You know, the twin snakes. Twin snakes wrapped around a T or wrapped around a staff, or just twin snakes. Sharing a squash ball or a billiard ball or something there. I think you could hit someone around the head with it, if that's... What tier are we in? Expert, so... rich iron. Or gold. If that's made out of solid metal, it's brass or whatever, if you do swing that and bat someone around with the head with it, that'll work. But I think that counts as a mace, not a staff at that point. And still in the expert tier. Just moved up to the top of the expert tier. There we go. That is the thing that is on the top of this staff. May have got a brief look at it, 2 frames a second. This. I don't even know what it is. It's got a thing on top of your staff. Thog smash. Here we have a spear inspired by Lex. It's got a spear head, and then it's got an insect, and then it's got a shaft. A bunch of centipede legs on it. Who put 3 sections of a giant centipede onto a spear? At least the staff looks reasonable. I'd like to remind you at this point these are woodworker recipes, not metalsmith or weaponsmith. This thing is made out of wood. You did not use any ingots of steel to make this weapon. A spear with 2 heads, ladies and gentlemen. You could stab at somebody's throat with it, 1 horn above each shoulder, and then grab him by the neck and twist. Or if he's on top of a ladder, just keep pushing. And another reasonable stick. Again. Thog smash! Thog double-handed smash! Okay, if you're up against a troll, yeah, a device that's meant to smash through a 6-inch concrete slab in 1 hit is probably a good choice. Japanese sai, one of those 3-bladed sword-breaker daggers, on a long stick. Is this a practical design? You tell me. Twirly bit. Again, this is woodwork. There's some metal. I can see it's mostly wood. There's definitely some metal involved. There's a great big rock in the top of it. If you smack them around the head with this, I'm not sure it's a staff attack. I think it's mace. And is that what I was looking at just now, or is that? Oh no, this is the next tier up. It's kind of pretty. Just pause. Don't move at all. That thing, when I first saw it, I thought, ye gods, a Christmas tree silhouette. If you stab someone with that between the ribs, the way she's holding it now, it's going to get stuck. It's going to wedge between ribs. It's going to go in however far it goes, pushing them apart and popping past them, and then stop. And to get it back out, you're going to have to twist it flat to pull it out between the ribs. That's going to be extraordinarily hard to do. And even if you stick it in someone's guts, it's going to stick to some extent. If they're wearing chainmail, if you shove it through chainmail, it's going to stick. And that was before I noticed that it's 3-way. It has 3 blades. So if you stab this into a soft part of someone, stick it in someone's horse as he charges past you, stab a warg in the guts with it, run it into an orc's stomach, whatever, it'll leave a really nasty wound, and because it's cut 3 ways, the flesh in between the cuts can retract, so the wounds will stay open and it'll bleed profusely. So in that sense, that is a really nasty weapon. And if you do swing across, you can see that they're not barbed, they're more like saw teeth. So they may not get quite that stuck. But being 3-way means if you shove it through chainmail or ribs somehow, I mean, there is no way around that is going to go through ribs easily, but maybe you could do it. How the heck you're going to get it back out, I do not know. You basically have to get a friend to come across with an axe and chop them up so that you can get your spear back. I've seen that one and it was pretty. That looks like it ought to be full of dried lentils. That looks like it might be full of dried frogs. Big hammer. The spike would work. And we've got another peculiar spear that's going to get stuck if you ever stick it into anyone, haven't we? You got a lot of hooks you can use to hook someone's shield out of the way with it. Either side, front or back. If you get the point past someone's shield, but the shield then deflects the spear, you can use that spear to pull the shield down out of your way and then jab with it. So you've got that. You could hook someone's sword out of the way the same way, or an enemy's spear shaft. But I think that's going to get stuck. Which, if you threw it at someone, would be quite effective, because it'd stick in, it wouldn't come back out, and that's going to impede their movement. But using it as your main melee weapon, I don't think you get to use it very many times. That's all right. And we come to the silliest of staffs. Maybe. Look at that thing. It looks like you ought to put some kind of, glowing rock in the top of it and use it as a street lamp. Or at least a lantern. I have one of these, actually. Take the wooden haft off the bottom of it and just get that top bit. Put a light bulb in it and plug it into the mains, and I've got one of those. Mine's got a lid over it to protect the light bulb. And this one, I think, is meant to be taken on a fishing boat for finishing off the marlin once you've brought them alongside. Not used in a combat. It's too elfy, long and slender. Alright, it's black ash, which you would find in the east half of the Misty Mountains, so by the time you get to this thing, you're familiar with Elrond and elven styles. It really looks like it ought to be in Rivendell, doesn't it? Black ash, eastern Misty Mountains, and eastern Angmar, and Eregion. I don't think you can get to any of those places without running into elves, so it's alright to be making elven style things by the time you can make this, but it doesn't look like you'd want to use it in a war. It looks like it's a little too delicate for that. Very next item on the list. Bundle of mace heads, really long haft, then a bunch of mace heads, and then it's got goat horns? It's got goat horns. Loremaster, friend of beasts, maybe one day you'll be able to summon a American bison, and this will be the perfect staff to have in your hand when you do so. These spears did start out sensible. I promise you these spears started out sensible. I did actually show these spears starting out sensible. It's just a dagger on a stick. I just wanted to remind you that they did start out sensible, while you were looking at this thing and wondering, what the were they thinking? Is that 2 corkscrew blades, or 2 flattened corkscrew blades, or 1 single piece of steel? Can those 2 wiggly lines flex past each other. If you stab someone with that, it's just going to crumple unless you get both points into a soft bit, and then they can actually go on two separate tracks, which would leave two deep wounds, but very, very narrow deep wounds, neither of them where you aimed the spear, and then a very short, very shallow wound from that gold spike in between them, if you got it that far in. And then you have to pull it back out. And I just don't think that's a good weapon. Unless you're attacked by giant wine corks. And somebody has stolen the top of Barad-dûr and mounted it on a stick. Can't see it because, of course, the dressing room doesn't let me zoom in there, but it does look like someone has stolen the summit of Barad-dûr and put it on a stick. And don't tell me this isn't a flanged mace. You can call it a staff, but that is a flanged mace. Interesting note here, on this tier they are holly for 51 plus and ilex for 54 plus. Ilex, Latin name for holly. It's the same plant. But that reminds me that there is a ranged weapon in here. That's not it. Not the scout weapons. The silver ilex bow. It's a good weapon, right? Look at that. All that physical mitigation, all that critical rating, and reduced skill inductions. And it does Balerian damage and makes enemies more vulnerable to Balerian damage. So it's a pretty good weapon. Alternative version of it gives you vitality rather than critical rating. And really induced skill inductions, which for anyone who can sling that thing over their back is good, you know? Sling this over your Guardian's back and never actually use it to shoot anything. It's still giving you that vitality and the mitigation. Guardians don't really have skill inductions, but however, from in front, nice bow, yeah? Where does the silver part come in? Right there, baby. Somebody has made a silver Klingon bat'leth and stuck a bow to the back of it. Yeah. The equivalent spear, that's alright. It's got kind of stripey, like it's shaped out of plywood effect, but got a nice handguard, nice guard on it. Useful as a boar spear. It's got a respectable head. It's not ludicrously flimsy anywhere. You know, it's just a spear. Silver ilex staff, on the other hand, again with the huge chunk. And is it just me, or does that look like a flower sticking its tongue out at you? Bleh. You gonna do prod someone with a great big green gemstone? Maybe it is a flower sticking its tongue out at someone. Lawmasters are weird. And that funny design again. This one is actually the Golden Host staff. 44 might. Not terrible. And all that parry rating. Good for Guardian. 44 will and fate. Good for a Lawmaster. Golden Host because this is one that you only get to make if you've actually completed the Golden Host missions in South Mirkwood. So this is definitely associated with the elves of Lothlorien now. This is an elf thing, putting this shape on the end of the staff. I hope that helps you figure out what that shape is. I still don't know. Eastern tier is, of course, horse heads. Wooden horse heads. Nice work. The ears are going to break off them even faster than they would off the brass ones. But yeah, that's practical. And the hammer is a great big horse head. Of course, because it's Easternnet. Now here's a guy who likes his axes. Can't be good for his ankle. I think I recognise the bow. That's one of the ones I didn't bother showing because it's just a bow. So, don't forget to like and subscribe, as everyone has to say on every video on YouTube these days. And leave a comment. Say which one you thought looked most ridiculous. Say which one you would most like to have. Which one you would most like to hang on the wall. What on earth was the hole in the point of the sword all about? Do top hats suit female hobbits? Any other questions you feel like you can answer? So, thanks for watching Desecration Wench. I love you, and I will see you next time. Cue music. That's a great idea. Pause music. Don't move. Bang. Bobby. More music. Splash, woof woof. Splash, giggle. I'm a doctor. Ish.